give him a scholarship. Oh, if I see it, that just mean the battery's low. Red light on here. Houston, can you hear me? Testing. Huh. That's what. Prepared to hear some noise. Monkey see, monkey. Testing. Okay. A little loud. All right. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Is it all right if you turn down the volume, Sean? Yeah. The only reason why we have the microphone is that way if someone's watching live, they can hear it. Yes. All right. So Monday, we started Psalm 122, the Song of Ascents. We talked about how this is a song that the children of Israel would sing as they went up to Jerusalem. And before we continue, would anyone like to share something that they thought stood out to them just from the Hebrew that they would not have seen from the English, but something that stood out to you? We can get the microphone passed around. Yes. To the person I'm totally not related to in the back of the room. Can you hear it or no? Sean's adjusting it. By the way, thank you, Sean, for doing all this, helping with sound. If not, I can repeat it or give you my microphone. Sure.
So I thought that the fact that Jerusalem in the scriptures, the majority of the time, the yod is missing in that, and I did not realize that that is significant. First off, that it was missing, and then the significance is the number correlation to yod is 10. So Jerusalem is not complete until the 10 tribes have returned, and it's like a city, but it will be a city once they return.
Yeah.
Complete. So Jerusalem will be complete.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that was something that stood out to me as I was studying it, and even at the beginning of my Hebrew journey, just noticing that Jerusalem is spelled without a yod in it, like in between the L and the M and or the lamed and the mem, and Yerushalayim there at the end. There should be a yod there, but it's missing. So that's because like you said, the 10 tribes are missing. Last time we got together, we talked about unity, right? All of Israel being unified as one on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. But also unity could be two ways. It's our relationship with our brother, but it's also our relationship with heaven. And today we're going to talk again about that unity between heaven and earth. All right, so someone go ahead in the English and read all of Psalm 122. Who wants to go ahead and read that? We don't need a microphone for that, but we have one? Awesome. Who wants to read it? Joe. Awesome.
Only because you said it was in English. Ooh. Oh, well. A Song of Ascents by David. I was glad when they said to me, the house of Adonai, let's go. Our feet were already standing at your gates, Jerusalem. Jerusalem, built as a city, fostering friendship and unity. The tribes have gone up there, the tribes of Yehovah, or Adonai, as a witness to Israel, to give thanks to the name of Adonai. For there the thrones of justice were set up, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for shalom in Jerusalem. May those who love you prosper. May shalom be within your ramparts, prosperity in your palaces. For the sake of my family and friends, I say, shalom be within you. For the sake of the house of Adonai our God, I will seek your well-being.
Thank you, Joe. Very well read. So, reading the Hebrew, we're going to be reading Psalms 122, verses 4, verses 5, and verses 6. Does someone want to attempt to read the Hebrew, or if you guys want me to, I can go ahead. A lot of my Hebrew students for Monday are not here today. So I'll go ahead and read. Sheshamalu Shevatim Shivtei Yah. So there the tribes would go up, the tribes of Yah, Edut le'Israel, to the testimony of Israel, L'chodot l'Shem Adonai, to give thanks or to acknowledge the name of Hashem. Ki shama yashavu kisot lemishpat, for there were thrones set up for judgment, kisot levet David, thrones for the house of David. And then our last verse, Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim. Do you notice that about Yerushalayim? Is there any yod in between these two letters? No. Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim. Ishla'u Ochavayich. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper who love you. All right. So let's start at verse 4. Right? Shesham alu shevatim. So what we have here is our noun, which is shevatim. And shevatim comes from the word shevat, not to be confused with Shabbat, but shevat would be a tribe. A tribe, right, would be called a shevet in Israel. A shevet. Maybe the shevet of Reuben, the shevet of Dan, or the shevet of Judah. And it comes from, if we are pulling up the Strongs on the side, it means to branch off. It's like a rod, a staff, or a branch. And already I'm thinking about Yeshua, what he said. Why am I over here? How Yeshua said, he's the vine, and what are we? The branches. You have Israel, which is this national identity. But from the nation that is Israel, you have these branches. And these shavets, these extensions, would be Judah, would be all of Israel as one. Now, as we look at this, right, it repeats the word shevatim. Shevatim, the singular, if I have a dry erase marker, would be shevet. That's the singular. That in Hebrew means a tribe. Now, I'm going to pull it up here, that way you guys can see it on my screen. Look directly at the highlighted words that I have on my screen, where I've highlighted. All right, shevet. If I say tribes, I would add the plural ending, which is an I vowel. What's an I vowel? Looking at your vowel sheet. What's an I vowel? Looking at your vowel sheet. What's I have it as a cheat sheet. It's look in the section that said I type on your vowels. It's one dot. And then you have a yod and a mem, right? These three make a masculine. So if shevet is a masculine noun, shevet is a masculine noun, then shevatim is the plural form, because I am, endings, I am, or hirik, yod, mem endings in Hebrew are masculine. They're masculine. And I'm dropping the marker. Goodness gracious. And it fell all the way back there. Is there another dry erase marker around here? Fell right behind the table. But the point is, what you see here at the ending, this is the word shevet is repeated twice. It's repeated twice. It's repeated twice to draw a connection, to draw your attention to something. That gathered in Jerusalem, Shesham. She means that, and Sham means is there. That is there in Jerusalem where they have ascended, Shevatim, tribes, extensions out of Israel. What kind of extensions? The Shiftei Adonai. So Shiftei is just the construct form of Shevatim. Think about it this way. Tribes is Shevatim. Tribes of would be Shiftei, right here, where the highlighted word is. Hebrew verbs and Hebrew nouns are either absolute. Think of an absolute noun as friends. Construct means it's constructed with another noun. Friends of. Does it work? I hope it works. If I drop this behind the table, good, it works. So, what we have here is, over here that you see highlighted, that's the absolute. The tribes that went up. But the construct here is the tribes of. What are these the tribes of? What's the highlighted word now? 2 letters, Yod He, with an A vowel. The A vowel is underneath the Yod. Yah. These are the tribes of Yah. What does it mean it's the tribes of Yah? Why not spell out the full name? Right? Why not spell out the full name? The answer lies in Numbers 26. We talk about connection, and that the tribes are unified together, right? But we cannot think of that unity in terms of a Tower of Babel unity. Let us all have one speech. Let us all have one purpose. Yes.
How did you know that the answer lies in Numbers 26? Is there something in the Blue Letter Bible that gave you that clue, or was that just your previous knowledge?
It's a little bit of previous knowledge, and we're going to go there. We're going to talk. And I also read some Rashi on the passage that connected this section back to, Rashi connected this Psalm 122, this verse in Psalm 122 back to Numbers, and I'll explain that connection.
So other commentaries would bear that out too.
Yeah, commentaries.
Okay. So
commentaries.
There's nothing in here necessarily that would have directed you there.
The Yod and the He in Yah's name connects you back to Numbers 26. The Hebrew does.
I know, but if you're just using Blue Letter Bible, I'm saying you
so
might not know that.
You would not know that. You have to. So a lot of this comes down to biblical literacy also.
Right.
You just have to get so familiar with the passages and how to interpret the passages in the Hebrew that you get to the point where your brain will start making those connections. I notice a theme here in this passage based off of the Hebrew. I notice these Hebrew letters showing up. I can connect it to another passage. We're going to talk about Numbers 26 in a second. But there's 2 letters here. These are the tribes of Yah. We're going to get there. But I want to talk about, before we get to Numbers 26, the concept of biblical unity amongst the brethren. Biblical unity doesn't mean we get along, even though it does mean that. It means we're all tied to the same source. So if we're sitting around like the Tower of Babel and we're all holding hands, right? That's really not true biblical unity. That's man's idea of unity. Godly unity is we're all tapped into Messiah Yeshua. We're all tapped into Yah. And because of that, we have unity with each other. We are connected to the truth, and that overflows into our connection with one another. So, Let's go to Numbers 26. By the way, what are these the tribes of? Yah. So what letters are we looking for? I'm going to do a dal instead of a hey because I do not believe in erasing God's name. So we're looking for yod and we're looking for hey. That hey, I used a dal in the place of hey. So we're looking for these two letters, right? Yod and hey. All right. Go into Numbers 26. They're counting all the tribes of Israel. It's after the plague. And we have this word, Se'u et Rosh. Se'u comes from the word Nasa in Hebrew. Nasa, think of as elevate. When I was learning Hebrew, we learned Nasa, right? It means to elevate or to carry, kind of like a NASA rocket, right? A rocket is carried out into outer space. So Nasa, which is this first root, means to carry. So Nasa, elevate. Se'u, this is the same word, Nasa, just plural, and it's imperative. Nasa, elevate et Rosh. Rosh is the Hebrew body part meaning head. Elevate the head of the Kol Edat B'nai Israel. Elevate the head of the whole assembly of B'nai Israel. We notice that word Adat right there. That also ties back to Psalm 122, verse 4. And it's in the word testimony, edut. All of Israel, they're an edut. They're not just an adat. Everyone say adat. Adat would be an assembly. They're also an edut. They're a testimony. The assembly together is a testimony of God and the kingdom. So elevate this assembly. You know how we elevate this assembly? That's a dot. We put a vav in there, and then it becomes a testimony. Because without the vav, it's just an assembly, a people. But with the vav, it's a testimony. What is a vav a letter of? Vav is a letter of connection. Connection of what? Genesis 1:1, Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning God created et hashamayim, the heavens, and then we have our first vav in the Bible, the et haaretz, and the earth. Hashamayim, the et haaretz. The V sound in the et is the vav. Vav is a Hebrew letter that signifies connection. Connection between what? What is the first connection made? What are two objects? What are the first two objects connected in the Bible? Heaven and earth. So Vav, which is the number 6, which symbolizes man, and how all of creation is to connect heaven and earth, symbolizes the connection between heaven and earth. Give you an idea. In the Paleo, Vav is also a nail. Vav is also a Hebrew word that means nail or tent post. The tabernacle is being built. The tabernacle has to be held down. What do they use to hold the tabernacle down? Tent pegs, Vavs. It connects the tabernacle to the earth. So Adat, that's all of us in the same room. We're all singing happy songs. We're all, I love you, brother. I love you, sister. We're all family, right? But we're not really an assembly. When we bring in that Vav, now we are a testimony. We go from being just a group of people, but to being a group of people that's connecting heaven and earth. So, Sa'u'et Rosh Kol Edat B'nai Israel. Si'u, lift up the head of all of Israel, unify them. And we're counting from 20 to 60 years old, all who are able to go out to war. But when we are taking this, we're also supposed to look at the tribes. And as we're looking at the tribes, right, we're going to start with Reuben. We'll notice something in their names. And this is where the Yod and the Hey comes from. These are the tribes of Yod and Hey Yah. Right? I could write up on the board, if I erase it, right, if I make room, Reuven. Reuven means to see a son. But if I write his name out, right, on the board. I may need to put a vav in there. And I need to put a vav in between right here. I'm going to put a vav right there. All right. If I wrote Reuven right here, what happens in our passage is, instead of saying this is the tribe of Reuven, we add a hey to the beginning of Ha-Reuven, and we say, instead of saying Shevet Reuven, we call them the Reuvani. Reuvani. And we put the hey at the beginning and the Yod. And Rashi talks about how the Yod and the hey are extra letters put in his name. Then guess what? We go to Simeon. Simeon's the next tribe. When it summarizes the Simeonites, it does the same thing. Hashimioni, right? Shimeon, if you're looking up here, I need to expand this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in. Is that better, guys? Let me bring it up to... How's that? All right, so you can see that. Shimeon. That noon would be a final mem. A noon, final noon. Again, we notice superfluous letters. The Yod and the Hey at the end. Hashemioni. That's showing what's Yah doing to elevate Israel right now. He's attaching his name to each of these tribes. You go through, let's do it again. After them, the Levites aren't counted with this. We count Gad next. Let's look at Gad. It doesn't do it with the tribe of Gad. Let's go to Judah, though, but it does it again with the tribe of Judah. Yehuda, his name has a Yod and Hey at the beginning and end of it, which is interesting. With these individual families, though, let's look at the individual families too. Again, Hey, Yod. Yashuv is the guy's name, the head of the family. But the Hey and the Yod's at the beginning. Shimron, right? That's his name. Right there. But what's at the beginning and the end? Yod and Hey. Families of the Zebulunites. Zebulun, here we go, the tribe of Zebulun. What's at the beginning? What's at the end? Yod and Hey. Zevulun, right? Chazavuloni has the Yod and Hey at the end. And then every time you see the Helkites, Asrielites, and the Shechemites, it has the Yud and He attached to it. And it's going through all these tribes of Israel and all these families, and they're attaching the Yod and He to them. When it's just saying the tribal identity's name, it's not doing it with all of them, but when it's breaking up the individual families, it has a Yod and He attached to it. So what's going on is Yah is attaching his name to the tribes. This is one layer. So if you think about it, on one layer, they're counting Israel. And they're saying, is everyone here? On a deeper layer, it's saying, these are the families. And on an even deeper level, it's Yah attaching his name. So the rabbis get into an interesting discussion. They're like, why does God attach his name? The reason why he attaches his names to the tribes is because in Israel, when they were in Egypt, right, they preserved their national identity. They were not perfect, but they did not mix with the nations. They stayed the tribe of Judah in Egypt. They stayed the tribe of Benjamin in Egypt. They stayed the tribe of Reuben in Egypt. Also connects to relationship purity. Connects to the place of circumcision with Abraham. Right? That's the place where you guard your relationships. Husband and wife guarding their relationships. Guarding themselves. Saving yourselves, keeping yourself pure for the kingdom. Right? That's sanctifying yourself for God. And so in our physical world, when we take our physical lives and we sanctify it, right? I'm not going to click that. What happens is, Yah as a nation, when the nation does that, Yah attaches his name. The Feast of Tabernacles and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is a time where we connect with God. But our lives have to be pure for us to connect with God, is the point. If we partner with God in purifying our lives, and that's the whole point of unleavened bread, where we're purifying, right? What happens is Yah attaches his name to us. Because we call circumcision Brit Milah. Brit. What does the word Brit mean? A covenant. What does a covenant do? A covenant attaches two people together. A covenant attaches a husband and wife. A covenant attaches Yah to Israel. When Israel observes the place of their brit, when they guard purity in all areas of their life, not for the sake of just guarding purity because we're elevated, but because we love God and we're in a covenant relationship with God, what happens is we are connected to God. And we experience his power in our lives, and we're unified, and that enables us to be unified with each other. So, this is about heaven and earth coming together. And that Yod that we talked about, all Israel being gathered together, that's all Israel accepting the Brit, accepting the covenant, coming back to Torah, accepting the Torah. And that's all the nations accepting the Torah. Also, the Brit means your heart is being circumcised. And we all have to go through this circumcision process. Even in order to celebrate Passover, what do you have to do? Be circumcised. But what does God really want from us? A circumcised heart. So, these are the tribes of Yah. These are the tribes that go up. They go up to Jerusalem knowing that they are a connection. They're not just an adat, they're an edut. They're a testimony to the fact that they're in covenant with Yah. Why? To give thanks, to acknowledge the name of Yahweh. Ki shama yashavu kisot lemishpat. That's verse 5. Kishama, for there they dwelt, before the judgment sat. Right? And it says stood. I do not like that word. Stood. It should be yashvu, dwelled, or sat. Because yashav means to sit or dwell. Yashav also means to study. So think about it this way. When you learn something new, what do? What am I doing? Well, I'm teaching, but I'm also learning. I'm still learning. When I learn something new, I feel like I have to stand. When I need to sit down and process what I just learned because it went way over my head, what do? I need to sit because I need as much energy as I can to think about what I'm processing. So what does Israel do when they're studying Torah? Yashav, they sit. That's why schools of learning are called yeshivas. It's where you sit and you devote all your energy to studying Torah. So, they're going there to the thrones of judgment. In Israel, we don't really, today in the Torah roots, Hebrew roots movement, whatever you call it, we don't really have a structure of leadership. If you go to a congregation, we then have a structure of leadership. But there's really no structure of leadership where we go to. If we are Israelites, first century Israel, you go to your local town. In your town's gates, we talked about what's in the gates. Government. 23 judges or 3 judges in your gates, right? But when you go up 3 times a year, you're going to Jerusalem. How many judges there? There's 71 on the Temple Mount. And you're going there, and these judges, what are they doing? You're learning Torah while you're going up. You're not just offering your sacrifices, you're also going to the Temple Mount to learn from the teachers about Torah. So you're not just sacrificing, you're not just having a great time eating and drinking and fellowshipping, you're learning about Torah from the judges. Everyone's bringing up their court cases, right? Every time there's a court case and a question about and a dispute about how to keep Torah, you're not going to go up, if you're in Galilee, you're not going to go up more than 3 times a year. So doesn't it make sense to save your court date for one of the 3 festivals? So when you go down to Jerusalem, you take your court case down, whatever court dispute you have that, if you think about it, it was too difficult for the court of 3 in the gate, so you took it to the tribal. So it's too difficult for the tribe of 23, so you took it to Jerusalem, kind of like our court system, lower court, state Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, whatever court of appeals, right? It follows the chain structure. You go 3 times a year to Jerusalem, and you have your case heard. But while you're there, it's not just a case to prove that you're right. It's also you learn while you go. Imagine approaching life and the disputes and challenges in life with the mindset, I'm also going through this to learn. I'm learning how to keep Torah. Because these 71, they sit in the seat of Moses. So that means they are one step closer to their teachers. And their teachers are one step closer to their teachers, all the way back to Mount Sinai and Moses and the original court is 70. So there dwell the thrones of Mishpat. That's justice. There dwells the thrones of the judges. Kisot is interesting because kisei, I'm going to erase all this, means a throne. Kisei. So we're going to talk about plural nouns, right? Plural nouns. What's one of the suffixes that shows a plural noun? What's one of the ways of showing a plural noun in Hebrew? What do I add to the end of a word? I and M, right? Im, right? But also, if it's a feminine noun, I add oat to the end. And I'm not talking about oatmeal. I'm talking about oat. And oat shows feminine plural nouns. like in Sukkot or Shabbatot, your Sabbath. I'm trying to think of another one. Torot, teachings. Not just a Torah, which is a teaching, but Torot, right? Ot. So that would be a Vav with an O vowel attached to it and a Tav. What we see here is the word kisei. Kisei is a throne. Kisei is a throne. It has a kaf, an I vowel underneath it, a samik, a tsere, which would be an E vowel, and then the aleph is silent at the end. But in our text, it's plural, because it's a feminine plural noun. And it's kisot. We get rid of the E vowel and replace it with a shava, which is silent, because we are making room for the feminine plural suffix, the ot at the end. And we have kis, ot. And so it's not just one throne, but it's multiple thrones. I'll give you a tool for your Hebrew study toolbox. When you are given plural, but it's not specified whether it's plural or not, then you need to think two. Because what's the minimum of plural? Singular would be one. Plural at its minimum denotes what? Two or more. So from this, a Hebrew mindset looks at this and says, didn't specify how many, so we're dealing with two. What does two represent in this case? We're talking about how Israel, how they're not just an adat, they're an adut. Adut with a vavin, connecting heaven and earth. Yah's will is literally being performed on earth in Israel like it is in heaven. Right? So kisot means there's two. There's a vav connecting the two. There's a heavenly throne and there's an earthly throne. The heavenly throne sits above Jerusalem. And the rabbis get into crazy arguments about how high the heavenly throne is above the earthly throne. Then the earthly throne is down below on the Temple Mount. It's very interesting because it talks about on Solomon's throne, speaking of thrones, Solomon's throne had how many steps on it? 6 steps. So as you're thinking about what Hebrew letter represents the number 6, Vav. What does Vav represent? What does number 6 represent? Connection. Vav is a masculine letter, so it represents masculinity and connection. So, you have 6 steps on Solomon's throne. It's representing Solomon sat on the throne of God, which means he was able to, as a righteous ruler, dispense God's will on earth as it was in heaven. And on that, this is where it gets pretty interesting. How many lions were on the steps of his throne? 12. 1 on each side. Each lion for the tribe of Israel. And now this is where it gets pretty interesting. Right? And I lost my train of thought. Right? So there's 2 lions per side of the throne. I had lost my train of thought. I got it back. What are steps to a throne called? Ma'alot. Ma'alot. And Psalm 122 is the song of what? Ascent. So a step is called an ascent in Hebrew. So a step is a ma'alot, just like this psalm is a psalm of ma'alot. It's a step on the throne of how we're connecting to God. It's pretty interesting because Isaiah 66 verse 1 says something very interesting. It says, heaven is the throne and earth is the footstool. Heaven is the place where God's throne is. Ezekiel's vision, he has this crazy vision where he sees the throne of God and he sees the four creatures around the throne. And there's four wheels, right? That's what the throne of heaven looks like. Corresponds to the throne below. What is the throne below? On the Temple Mount. Where does it sit? Where is the throne room on the Temple Mount? The Holy of Holies. And the Ark of the Covenant is God's throne. God sits on the cherubim. How tall is the throne? How tall is the cherubim above the ground? How tall is the ark? The ark is 9 handbreadths tall. You throw the cover on, that is 10 handbreadths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This would be a handbreadth. And it's literally a tapach, which is a stamp. It's a stamp that God's presence is here. That's what the yod represents also, that we're talking about. That's why Yerushalayim also does not have a yod, because God's presence rests on top of the 10 handbreadths on the throne. And that's why the rabbis also teach that the presence of God does not rest any lower than 10 handbreadths on earth. Think about that for a second. So in creating the tabernacle and in creating the Ark of the Covenant, what was the purpose of the Ark of the Covenant? To bring God's presence down as close to earth as it possibly could be. Because now, the Ark of the Covenant is a part of the earth. And when God's presence comes on the Ark of the Covenant and fills the Ark of the Covenant, then God's literally touching earth physically. So now you see the connection between heaven and earth. Throne in heaven, throne on earth. And this is what it is. The kisot for judgment, and then it repeats it. What is the kisot rooted in? Levet David. Levet David. The house of David. Messiah is the one who sits on the throne and brings the connection. So, we're going to wrap up. May it be. So what do? We pray for the completion. The completion. When I say peace, do not think about, right? Do not think about peace the way UN thinks of peace with cute little doves. But think about it as completion. In terms of the word shalom, when it says pray for the peace, ask for it. Literally ask for it. Request for it. Beg for it. Is what the Hebrew says. Sha'alu shalom. Shalom comes from this word shalom, or shalem, which literally means to complete. But it's also a legal term. When I owe someone something, right? It is my duty to shalem, to pay them back the complete amount. I must pay them back the complete amount. In Jewish law and Jewish tort law and Jewish case law, they use this word a lot, shalem, shalom, to recompense. We throw in the vav, right? We throw in the vav at the end. We no longer have shalem, we have shalom, which means completion. Pray for the peace. Very interesting in Numbers 29, I believe. Pinchas spears the Midianite woman. And he spears the prince of the tribe of Simeon, I believe. And God says, I extend to him a covenant of peace. What happens in that verse? The the vav is split. It's one of those textual oddities. Just like Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 begins with a giant bait at the beginning of your Bible. Just like Numbers chapter 10 has the two noons that are backwards, right? There is a broken vav in Numbers chapter 29, where the vav is literally in the text written where it's split in half, like this. And it's the vav in shalom. The vav is split in half. Again, for my Hebrew minds, what does vav represent? Connection. So what happened with Midian? Israel went astray. They formed breeds, covenants that they were not supposed to make. Not just physically with the women of Moab and the women of Midian, but also with the gods of Midian and Moab. Because of that, their connection with heaven was broken. So pray for the peace of Jerusalem, that the vav is reconnected, that Israel's restored. And part of that in the peace, bringing that peace back, is we also prepare our own lives. And I also take inventory on my own heart. And this Passover, as I'm keeping this Passover feast, I'm mindful that I'm circumcising my own heart. If you want the connection of heaven in your life, circumcise your heart. Truth is, even if you try to circumcise your heart, you're not going to get it all. You can't get all of the leaven out. That's what the candle is for when getting the leaven out. Helps you see things that you wouldn't otherwise see. God says, circumcise your heart. In another passage, he says, I will circumcise your heart. The hidden things belong to God. They're revealed to us. So in this season, as we are purifying the leaven, circumcising our hearts, he will finish the work that he started in us. So, I think I'm going to wrap up there. We're out of time. But may the kingdom be revealed in your own life. Any questions or comments before we go? Yes, Mike. Mike.
You mentioned earlier when the tribes were mentioned, if I heard you correct, the yod and the hay. The yod was at the beginning, the hay was at the end. So I'm looking up on Blue Letter Bible.
The hay was at the beginning.
Oh, the hay's at the beginning, the yod's at the end. Okay.
They reverse it. I could talk about that, but there's a reason why.
Okay. So, and that's so when you read that Hebrew word, those are two letters that aren't really part of the pronunciation. It's just making a connection. Is that?
They are a part of the pronunciation. It's the prefix ha, and it's the ending e. It's given the word identity. So the tribe of Shimeon, they're the Shimeonites. It's the reason why we call Shimeon Shimonites.
Okay.
Ha-Shimeoni, Ha-Reavuni, Ha-Yehudi. Or it would be Halevi, right?
Okay. So this is where my mind is getting confused. So like the Gadites, the Reubenites, the Simeonites. So the word starts out with a different letter on each of those. So how does the hay begin? How does the hay show up in those words? And yet,
it would show up as the prefix ha at the beginning.
As a prefix.
Yes, ha. So you would take Reuven, and then you would add the hay in. So that would be ha Reuven. Then you would take the e at the end, the I, that would be the I vowel y, and that would be your yod at the end. So that would be ha Reuven e. Ha and e are your hay and your yod, prefix and suffix.
Okay, so can you like take one of the tribes, like the Reubenites? So just write the Reubenites up there, how it would be.
So how I'd write it is,
And then like the Gadites, I don't know, maybe that word doesn't even exist in the Bible. Does the Gadites
yeah,
or the Simeonites? I don't care, but they both start with different letters. So just kind of show me how that
Re, U,
constructed.
Ven, right? Then this letter's Nun, so I'll just treat it, keep it the same. Reuven, right?
Okay, that's Reuben.
Yes, and then I would have a yod here. I have an I vowel here, so that would be E. Reuveni, because the yod, here's the yod, and then Ha, which is the Reubenite.
The.
The,
So the hay is
the,
okay.
and this would be the Ite, and this would be Reuben.
Okay. So all right.
The Reubenite.
Okay. So the yod is pronounced the same on all the, and you just put the word the is where the hay comes in.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That explains it.
Instead of saying Shevet, Shevat Reuven, they chose to do this instead. There's a couple ways you could have said that, Shevat Reuven or Ha Reuvuni. So what they did also is they're alluding to another question, and maybe this could be your homework. There's a verse that says, by Yah, Yah is the foundation. Yah is the sustainer. He's the rock of the world. The worlds. That's literally what it says. I don't know the exact reference off the top of my head. It's in Psalms. Yah is the rock. By Yah, Adonai is the rock of the worlds, or an everlasting foundation, is how it's translated. And it's by Yah, Yod and He. Rabbis teach from this passage that God created this world with a He, which is why Harelveni, and the pattern is it begins with the He and ends with a Yod. Because the children of God start off in this world and end with the Yod, which is the kingdom to come. He represents this world, the Yod represents the world to come. Because in this world, we only have part of the revelation. He is number 5. Yod is number 10. So I have, at best, half the revelation that I'll have in the world to come. I would say more like 1/10 of a millionth of the revelation. That would be like 1/10 millionth of the revelation. It's infinite, what I do not know now compared to what I will know in the kingdom. So, He is this world, also tied to Genesis 2, chapter 4. There's a verse where God says, when He created heaven and earth. And when it says when He created, there's a little He there. Rabbis say from that passage we know that God created the world with a little He. And the other Yod is the world to come. So by attaching His name to Israel, what God's doing also is He's showing that Israel has an inheritance in both worlds. This world, Olam Hazeh, and the world to come, Olam Haba. All right. Sure.
Like, this is completely different. This is completely different. Although a question relating with this, because in the readings we talked about Hezekiah, King Hezekiah, and I believe the translation says he was like one of the only kings that, and I don't remember how it goes. I wanted to look at that. He was one of the only kings, because you talked about King Solomon, right? But that temple was destroyed. King Hezekiah was one of, or maybe it was Josiah, King Hezekiah? One of the young king that destroyed all of the idols.
Hezekiah and Josiah was one of them.
So they did, and he said that he's recognized as one of the only kings that did not serve an idol. which is very interesting insight, correct? I mean, it's interesting to just think about. That was completely different than this question that I have, because it came up with this word toph for drum, but I'm trying to find a reference for like a location, Valley of Tophet or Plain of Tophet. I was wondering if, can you do that with this program?
Valley of Tophet, is it?
Toffet.
Valley of.
I'm not sure if it's a valley or if it's the plain, or because it has something to do with war. And this is when Miriam led the women in the song and the dance with the drum. We translate it as tambourine.
Yeah, it's also located in the Valley of Genom.
So where's that scripture? You have the scripture reference?
I'm going to use Raf AI.
Oh, I saw. Maybe I should look that up. Valley of Genom.
This is actually my first time hearing about it. 2 Kings 23:10. Also Jeremiah 7:31.
And Jeremiah what?
7:31.
7:31?
Yeah, check that out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm trying to respect everyone's time. So, okay, that's moving along. I was trying to think.
2 Kings, I don't have that one.
Yeah, I was going to.
It's also in Psalm 81.
Psalm 81.
Psalm 81, the toph, the drum. Just some of my own private stuff going on.
Absolutely.
But it was very interesting because when does Miriam use that, the drum?
Red Sea.
And what happened to all the Egyptians?
Drown in the Red
And
Sea.
the valley of Ginnit is where.
Yeah.
Interesting, right?
Very interesting. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, so it was almost like, it's like a miniature microcosm of the world to come. Yeah, so Exodus 15 begins with